a morally bankrupt care homeowner who took millions of pounds from wealthy pensioners and spent it on a lavish lifestyle, has been jailed for 21 years. David Barton, 64, was sentenced at Liverpool Crown Court on Friday for what Judge Stephen Everett described as the most brazen case of fraud he had ever seen. He was found guilty of 4 counts of conspiracy to defraud, 1 count of fraud, 3 counts of theft, false accounting and transferring criminal property after a trial which lasted a year. Care home manager Rosemary Booth, 69, was jailed for 6 years for 3 counts of conspiracy to defraud for her part in his scheme. The court, with a public gallery full of friends and family of victims and defendants, heard between 1997 and 2013 Barton had taken more than £4 million dishonestly from his victims, who were wealthy, elderly residents at the Barton Park nursing home in Southport, and had tried to claim a further £10 million. Judge Stephen Everett said, "I am struggling to remember anyone as dishonest as him, as morally bankrupt as him." Sentencing Barton, he said, "You are a despicably greedy man, a hypocrite who claimed you were caring for the residents. I'm quite sure the person you cared for the most is no one but yourself, not even your family, with your insatiable appetite for fancy cars and building your property empire." Benjamin Myers QC, prosecuting, told the 2-day sentencing hearing Barton would groom wealthy, vulnerable and childless residents before draining their bank accounts and becoming a beneficiary in their wills. Among his victims was Patricia Anderson Scott, the widow of former Everton FC chairman Bill Scott, who had £1.4 million taken from her. The court heard he targeted multi-millionaires Katie and Gordon Willey and destroyed the relationships between them and family and friends, hiring a life coach and psychic consultants to make spells to banish their family. Barton persuaded them to give him a large classic car collection belonging to Mr. Willey, who had Alzheimer's disease, and attempted to draw Mrs. Willey into a scheme where all of her wealth would pass to him and his business. After Mrs. Willey died, he put in a fraudulent claim for £10 million he said was owed to him. When police began to investigate Barton, he sold a number of his luxury cars, including 4 Ferraris and 2 Rolls-Royces, and later transferred money from the sales into his son's bank accounts. One had the prestigious number plate 3RR.ONE. Of Barton's favored ruses involved selling convertible Rolls-Royces, worth around £150,000, to residents for as much as £500,000. He would offer the frail pensioners occasional rides in the cars, but still retain them for his own use. Share this article. Share Paul Bogan QC, defending Barton, said he had enhanced the lives of many of the care home residents in their final years. He said, "It is only right that the court recognizes the abuse did not extend, as it does in some cases, to physical abuse, to neglect, but on the contrary, in relation to those, and, we say, hundreds of others in that period of time, they enjoyed their life at Barton Park." Jeffrey Payne, defending Booth, who was in tears in the dock throughout the hearing, said she had been exploited by Barton. He said, "Up to that point, Rosemary Booth was undoubtedly a woman of impeccable positive character who touched and affected many people's lives in a positive way." Detective Inspector John Smith, who led the investigation, welcomed the sentence. He said, "For 16 years, they preyed upon wealthy elderly people in Southport, depleting them of their hard-earned savings and enjoying a lavish lifestyle of fast cars, holidays and multiple properties as a result. The court heard Barton, whose name was originally Ramamoorthy Dasaratha Naidu, moved to the UK from South Africa with his family in the 1960s. A legal battle to take over his parents' nursing home business in the seaside resort of Southport, Merseyside, in the 1990s left him £2 million in debt, apparently sparking what his trial heard was his extraordinary greed. Renaming the home Barton Park, it offered the finest levels of care and attracted rich residents. Among the first was Patricia Anderson Scott, widow of a former chairman of Everton whose family bakery business was one of the region's major employers. Yesterday, after one of the longest jury trials in English legal history lasting a year and 3 days, Barton was finally exposed as a fraudster and jailed for 21 years at Liverpool Crown Court. Bookkeeper Kyria Hughes, 42, will be sentenced on Friday afternoon after she pleaded guilty to conspiracy to defraud and false accounting. The general manager at the home, Rosemary Booth, 69, also from Southport, was convicted of 2 counts of conspiracy to defraud and jailed for 6 years. Barton's 55-year-old wife Lucinda is awaiting trial on charges of conspiracy to steal, false accounting, conspiracy to defraud, theft and money laundering. The couple's sons, former Conservative councillor David Richard Barton, 28, and David Charles Barton, 25, face a separate trial for money laundering. All 3 deny the charges. Tantrum as woman died before he got her £5 million. Millionaires Kate and Gordon Willey moved into Barton Park in April 2011 after Mr. Willey developed dementia. The childless couple were targeted by David Barton, who manipulated Mrs. Willey, then 75, who was on the verge of a nervous breakdown over her 80-year-old husband's illness. Using a combination of threatening solicitors' letters and lies, Barton persuaded Mrs. Willey to cut all ties with her friends and family. Relatives tried desperately to reach out to Mrs. Willey, even contacting police and other agencies, but were unable to break the hold Barton had over her. When she died of a heart attack in May 2013, Barton, who was on the verge of getting her to sign an agreement paying him over £5 million in return for lifelong care, was furious. While nurses were attempting to resuscitate her, Barton threw a glass of water over Mrs. Willey, saying, "I can't believe she's done this to me." Mr. Willey, who sold his highly successful electrical wholesale business in the 1980s, was later moved to another home and died in 2016, aged 85. Nephew David Willey said his family were completely devastated by what had happened. Their solicitor, Amanda Noyes, of Royds Withy King, said Barton deliberately isolated them at the very time when they were most vulnerable.